Welcome to the real effective answers for life with your host, Tammy K, where we deal with real life, real people, and real answers for those difficult questions that many will not address. With every discussion planned, we pray that it brings insight, hope, healing, and deliverance as we keep it real so God can deal and we can heal. And today we're going to be dealing with the third part series of grief, and we're talking about complicated grief. And as previously, before I get started, I just want to first put a disclaimer out there that I am not a professional grief or bereavement counselor, but I am an ordained minister of the gospel, former student of Liberty University, where I majored in psychology with Christian counseling specialization, and I am also a certified trauma responder, and I am currently in pursuit of becoming a mental health coach. And then, just very briefly, in recapping part two, where we talked about walking with those through grief, and we discussed the do's and the don'ts, and I just want to briefly recap those. We certainly do want to listen and practice the power of presence, but we don't have to feel that we always have to talk or have the answer. We do want to share if it's applicable, if it applies and it brings comfort, but we don't want to overshare to the point that it seems like there's a comparison of the grief, a tit for tat, if you will, of whose grief was the worst. We do want to say that I cannot imagine how you feel, because reality, we can't. We're not that person. And so we're not inside of them, and we don't know their internal workings and how they're feeling. So we don't want to say, though, that I can imagine, because again, in all sincerity, even if the situations are similar, we truly cannot imagine, again, because we're not that individual. We do want to validate their pain and their emotions, and we don't want to invalidate them by making them feel like they're wrong for feeling the way that they do, or they have faith, less faith, or more faith, or they're lacking faith because of how they feel, or that someone else has more faith because they handled it differently. We do want to be a safe space for that person. And the acronym that was given was, we want to be a place of security and acceptance of their feelings and their emotions, and a safe place for them to express those things. We don't want to break their trust. We do want to allow them to heal at their own pace, and we don't want to impose our own ideologies. So, in other words, we want to allow them to heal at their pace and at their rate, however quickly that is, or however slowly that is. We do want to be a source of strength to them, and we don't want to be a source of negativity or stripping them. Many times in these situations, they're doing the best that they can to maintain some semblance of positivity. And so the last thing that they need is for us bringing a bunch of negative, comments or remarks or judgment, or, that's not the time to have family issues, roundtable to discuss the latest family debate. That's the time where, and in as much possible, we need to guard that person from all negativity. And we do want to know our limits and when to refer them to professional counseling or help if you feel that it is needed. And we don't want to hesitate to make that referral if we feel that it is necessary. And moving into the topic of signs of complicated grief. Now, obviously, these things are going to be there initially at the onset. So please know, and I'm prefacing it ahead of time, that this is after a long length of time. I would say at least past a year, or even if it's before a year, to where it's an exorbitant or extreme amount. But for the most part, just keep in mind that this is a rule of thumb. Again, everyone's different. We all heal differently and we handle things differently. But if after a year you're still feeling these intense feelings and emotions, it may be time for you to consider seeking counseling. There is a deep, intense sorrow or pain and a rumination over the loss of the loved one, and one that never seems to stop. It's like you can't focus on anything. else but that loved one and their death, and almost to the point of obsession. Again, I'm not talking about a couple of months down the line. That's completely normal. I'm talking about a year and a half later, and it's just, I mean, it's an intense, almost to the point of obsession, not a normal from time to time. Of course, you're going to think of that person. And especially if you've been with them for a longer length of time, you're never going to forget them, nor should you. So again, please be mindful of the time frame in which I'm speaking. There's an extreme focus on an attachment to the reminders of that loved one, or to the opposite extreme, there's an aversion or an avoidance of those reminders. And so either there's extreme attachment to where, you can't leave the room without, taking this specific reminder of the individual, or you can't leave the house without this momentum, whatever it might be. Or to the opposite extreme, you refuse to go to certain places that you all used to go to. You refuse to, um, partake in activities or to be around certain friends that you all used to be around together as a couple. So one or the other, either there's an extreme attachment or an extreme avoidance. There's a very powerful, intense, and persistent longing for that deceased person and wishing that they were still present. And of course, in the onset, absolutely. But again, be mindful of the time frame and the persistence to the point of obsession. Like you just cannot function because that is your consuming thought, and longing within your heart. There's an obsession with the departed person, and it's expressed through your speech. And it comes through your behavior and even your memories and your thoughts or fantasies. There's just like this intrusive, just it's almost like you just cannot get away from it. You cannot seem to have not one moment of just ordinary thought without that person consuming your every thought and your every move. There's a persistent bitterness, and anger about the loss toward the world. You're mad at everything and everyone, including those that may be there trying to help you. You can misinterpret their help, or you're suspicious of their help, or you're angry because you see your friends and they're all together and they're coupled up, if you will, and they're, have their loved ones, and you're very resentful and bitter that you don't have yours. And again, and I will probably preface this throughout this whole entire podcast because I want to make it very clear that I am talking about a year and a half, 2 years later, and this is still where you are, not the initial onset, because every one of these feelings and emotions are completely normal at the beginning of processing that loss. But again, I'm talking about after months and years, that have gone by and you're still feeling this way. There's an irritability and a hair triggering temper that's sometimes there as well with that bitterness and anger, that may even make you, if it's the person or the person that you're dealing with, difficult to deal with because you don't know what's going to set them off. And you don't know, even in normal everyday conversation where you might address something with them, just talking to them in general, it's a part of life. It's a part of, communication, and learning to, it's just a part of normal communication. You have your good, you have your bad, you have your differences, and not even negative differences. Sometimes you just may have a difference in opinion about something, but sometimes you might almost feel like you have to walk on eggshells during this time because you don't know what you might say that might trigger them, because they're not rightly processing things. And so they can take what you're saying totally out of context. And so there's, a balancing act, constantly of trying to make sure you're not saying the wrong thing because of that temperament that's there and that irritability that's there. Um, and for you as the person, you having those constant triggers and every little thing setting you off and every little thing is frustrating you. There's a lack of trust in others, and not even warranted. Well, why are you helping me? Or, well, what's your motive? Or what do you want? Or, especially sometimes even unfortunately, even with those Christians that are in church, and some of them, unfortunately, go through that part of the process where they blame God for the loss, and they're angry with God because of the loss, and they feel like God let them down, and they trusted God or they believed God for something and he didn't come through. And so now, because they're struggling to even believe and trust God, they struggle to believe and trust in others. There's negative expressions of doom and gloom and despair about life in general. There's the inability to enjoy life or to think back on positive experiences that you may have had with your loved one. So, there's things like, why does it even matter? Life's not even worth living. Who cares anymore? You know, um, it doesn't even matter at this point. Life's but a vapor. So, why bother to get excited about it anymore? Why bother to even care? Because it's, all going to go away at some point anyway. Um, so there's, that element of just the despair about just life in general. There's a numbness, there's a detachment, there's an isolation from and an avoidance of others, places, and social interactions and activities that you once enjoyed with your loved one. Um, because it brings back those memories. And so that goes back to the avoidance part that I kind of briefly mentioned earlier. You isolate yourself, or you refuse to hang out with certain people that you used to hang out with as a couple because now you feel like you're the third wheel. And then being with that person brings back memories from when you all hung out. There's also, you experience intense feelings of loneliness and emptiness, which a part of it is kind of, when you isolate and you do pull away from everything and everyone, it's going to bring and it's going to even magnify that feeling of loneliness and emptiness, then which can lead to depression and a deep sadness. It can lead to guilt, or self blaming, believing that you did something wrong or could have somehow prevented the death. If there are pre existing circumstances, such as mental health conditions, depression, PTSD, anxiety disorder, or some form of substance abuse during this time, those things can become magnified, or it begins the onset of using these things or these things occurring. There's reoccurring sleep interference, or what they call insomnia. Whether it's interference or disturbance, you may start off getting sleep, and then the next thing you know, you're up 3 hours in the morning and can't get back to sleep. So maybe you start off getting a little bit of sleep, but then you're only managing 3 hours of sleep per day, or night, I guess I should say. Um, then there's could also be the lack of attention to grooming and personal appearance. You just don't care, and you start looking like you don't care. And there's a refusing to leave the home, some to the opposite extreme of avoiding the emptiness of the home. They're constantly gone. And on the flip side of it, some of them refuse to leave the home because that was your last place of contact with that person. That was you all's home, and that was you all's safe haven, if you will. And so you refuse to leave the home, kind of like an attachment, if you will, an inordinate attachment to the home, because it's a constant reminder of that was you all's place together. There is denial and defensiveness when asked about the grief. If someone says, "Hey, how are you handling this? How are you managing?" It's, "What do you mean, how am I managing? What do you expect?" And on one hand, I get that. It's kind of like common sense. Obviously, I'm grieving. But on the flip side of it, 9 times out of 10, when someone asks that, they're not asking you that generically or that generally. They're wanting to know, are you processing it okay? Is there anything that they can do? Or, are you having difficulty with processing it? Are you having challenges with sleeping? They may be trying to get to the root of seeing if you're entering into that area of complicated grief. There's also trouble or you're unable to manage normal daily routines and functions like work and school and, or your finances, or, even your parenting responsibilities can seemingly become overwhelming during this time. There's behavior that might seem reckless and impulsive, and potentially self destructive, things that ordinarily you might not do. But now, because of this circumstance, you find yourself, out there, just drinking. It could be clubbing. It could be just things that are typically just not a part of your character and who you are. And just in a way of coping and as a part of your coping mechanism, you find yourself gravitating toward these self destructive behaviors. And then there's that feeling that life holds no meaning or purpose, and you feel like it isn't worth living without your loved one. And you wish that you had either died along with them or that you had died instead of them. And, sometimes this can then lead to talk of suicide or actual suicide attempts. And, if you find yourself in this place, please seek counseling. Please seek some form of bereavement counseling, because yes, the loss is unbearable, and it seems like you're never ever going to get through that space, but you are still living, and your life does matter, and it does count, and you are here for a reason, even though you may not feel that way. And I'm sure you're probably not even trying to hear that right now, but you're here for a reason. And so if you're getting to that point, you may want to reach out for help. um, and then things that might increase complicated grief is an unexpected or violent death, such as a car accident or murder, or suicide, the death of a child, close or dependent relationship to the deceased person. If you were extremely dependent on that person and your lives were extremely intertwined, definitely can cause complicated grief. Social isolation or loss of a support system or friendships can increase this feeling of complicated grief. Past history of mental health disorders, again, depression, separation anxiety, or PTSD. Those are things that, if it's already pre existing, the death of and loss of a loved one, especially depending on the amount of years that you have been with that person or know that individual, like especially if it's a family member, parent or your child or your spouse. Certainly, the longer that you've known that person, the more that these things can become magnified and intensified in your life. The traumatic childhood experience, such as abuse or neglect, and then other major life stressors as well, such as, major financial hardship, or having to transition between jobs, or having to relocate on top of having already suffered loss. Um, Experiencing more than one death within a short period of time, being highly dependent, once again, on others, to not just the individual that was lost, but then now finding yourself having to be highly dependent on others to help you to maintain and to function because of the loss, can complicate, I apologize, the grief, because it's like you've already lost the individual, and then now you feel like you're losing a part of yourself. And especially if you're used to being in control, and you're used to being, and when I say control, I don't mean it negatively, but if you're used to being the one making all of the decisions and more or less the go-to, and now you're finding yourself having to depend on the support of others. And then also deaths that are shocking or premature or unexpected, and or witnessing the death of an individual, or having to suffer alongside the individual that is now deceased, someone that died due to having an illness, and having to watch them transition from life to death, can also increase the risk of complicated grief. And then also suffering from substance abuse or, misuse, can also complicate the grief. And so some of the complications that come as a result of this are The depression, of course, we've already mentioned that, the anxiety, PTSD, significant sleep disorders, but then also a long term difficulty with daily living, relationships, or work activities, increased risk of physical illness such as heart disease, cancer, high blood pressure, suicidal thoughts or behaviors, or you can self medicate using alcohol or nicotine or some other form of substance, which of course leads into substance abuse. And so, complicated grief without the appropriate treatment can affect your physical, mental, social being and awareness. And so, if you're experiencing any of these symptoms or signs, please reach out. Prevention, it's not really clear how to prevent the complicated grief, but it is clear what can help and the things that can be done to try to assist and to bring you to a place of healing and to a place of being able to navigate life. And one of those things that you can do is talking. Don't be afraid to talk about your grief. Don't be afraid to cry in front of others. No one's judging you because you're crying. That's a normal human emotion. And so don't be afraid to cry in front of others. Don't be afraid to say, hey, I am struggling with this today. It's hurting me today. You don't have to act like you've got it all together and, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. Yeah, I'm handling this. I did this and I did this and now, yes, celebrate every step that you take toward healing and every accomplishment that you make toward being able to visit places and to process it. But at the same time, it's okay to, hey, you might be able to handle going to your favorite spot one day and then the next day be a total wreck. And it is okay because it's all a part of the process. Allow yourself to hurt. Allow yourself to feel that pain and allow yourself to heal so that you're not stuck in that sadness. Believe it or not, that pain will eventually begin to lift and it will eventually get to the place where you're able to feel again and you're able to enjoy life, never forgetting that person, and nor should you, but you're able to live life with their memories, but without the memories preventing you from living life. And support family members, friends. If you need a social support group, if you need a maybe, church based support group, um, please, by all means, reach out. Even if you need to, again, bereavement counseling, it is there for you. And a lot of hospitals will offer that initially. And so if it's there and it's offered, take advantage of that because they'll be able to help you to go through the emotions and to balance the emotions. And especially when something's new, you know, sometimes it's crazy, but you go through the craziness of you're already suffering, you're already dealing with this pain, you're already trying to balance this pain, but then now you're also on top of balancing the pain. Well, is this normal for me to feel like this, or is it okay for me to feel like this? And well, what will people think if they see me acting this way? Or is this normal? Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm upset, but am I supposed to be this upset, or is it okay to be this upset? And it's give yourself permission to feel however you are feeling and allow God, most importantly, to come in and meet you where you are. Because if you're angry, He already knows it. So the best thing you can do is just say, God, I don't understand. Why did you let this happen? If you're hurting, allow yourself to hurt. And I'm hurting right now. I don't feel like talking. I just pray for me, please. But right now, I just need some space. I'm hurting. And or whatever the situation is, don't be afraid, one, to allow yourself to feel those things and then to reach out. Maybe the bereavement counseling will be able to help assure you that what you're feeling is normal. What you're feeling is okay. It's all a part of the grieving process, and then help you to work through those feelings and emotions so that you can rightly balance what it is that you're feeling. And in being able to share that with someone, they professionally can help you and help prevent you from forming negative thoughts and beliefs that can eventually become a stronghold and harder for you to overcome if you don't allow someone into that space to help you process through them. And then, of course, certainly, definitely want to see your doctor, contact a doctor or mental health professional if the grief is so intense that and it becomes a problem with you being able to just function through everyday life again past a year. Certainly a year and a half, you definitely at that point want to reach out to your doctor or some medical professional to help you to get through this. And if at any time at all you are ever at a place of contemplating or even thinking about committing suicide, one, talk to someone you trust. And then if you think that you might act on those feelings, or if you're just really feeling that urge, please call 911 or your local emergency services right away. Or you can contact the suicide hotline for the United States. It is you can text, 988. Again, in the United States, you can text 988. Or you can call the suicide crisis and prevention line 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Or you can use a Lifeline chat. Any of those are all free and they are confidential. But I just want to, again, encourage you that everything that you're feeling is normal and it is okay to feel what you're feeling. But if it gets to the place where it's overwhelming and you feel like you just cannot do life anymore, you don't want to do life anymore, reach out for help because it is there for you and there are more for you than against you. And there are many that are there wanting to be an open arms to you. Sometimes people may not always reach out because they're trying to respect your space and not wanting to force themselves into that place or feeling like they're forcing themselves on you. So you may have to be the one to let them know, hey, I need help. Hey, I need to talk. I would like to talk with you. Yes, please, you're invited into this space. And please help me to get through this. And I certainly hope that with all three series on grief, that this has been helpful to many. As I previously stated when I first did it, I cannot tell you the calls that I've gotten at work. Where parents are having, or not the parents, but sisters or brothers are having to step in as the guardian ad litems because the parents have passed away, or the fathers because they've lost the wife, or the wife because the father has passed away. A friend of mine that I know of having, and several of my friends having lost their children, having had miscarriages, myself included. I have had a miscarriage. You know, and I've lost a parent, So this is what really prompted me just to do the podcast, just because, even with the COVID, there was so much life that was lost. And people are still recovering from that. And some have never even fully recovered from that loss. So just wanted to let those that are grieving, those that are assisting those in grieving, we all need each other and you're not alone in this. And if you need help, know that it is there and it is available to you. And always remember, no matter where you are in life, to keep it real so God can deal and we can heal.